and the Director of Montserrat Customs and Revenue Services, left the island for the Joint Ministerial Council meeting in the United Kingdom. On arrival in the UK, we visited the Montserrat UK office, where we met and discussed with the Montserrat UK representative, Mrs. Janice Panton, arrangements for the JMCA and arrangements for our trips to meet members of the diaspora. On arrival in the overseas territory leaders are elected and elected representatives attended the Remembrance Day service and ceremony at the Cenotaph on November 14th, 2021. The main agenda items which were discussed at JMC included Environment and Ocean, International Maritime Organization, UK-OT relationships, economic resilience, law enforcement, health, to include COVID-19 and mental health, and protecting the vulnerable, and we also discuss inclusivity. But in addition to the roundtable discussions at the JMC, my team held bilateral meetings with a number of persons. First of all, we met with the FCDO team. Those members from Glasgow came down. The Premier and the Minister of Finance and the Premier and the Finance Secretary met with the Minister of Energy. I had a bilateral meeting with the Minister with responsibility for overseas territories. And we also attended and had meetings with members of diaspora, both in Manchester and Leicester. In addition to those meetings, we also had financial service meetings where we were joined with members from Montserrat, Financial Service Commission, and the Attorney General on the financial service matters. We also had a meeting of the Overseas Territories Association Political Council, which is held once a year, where members of and leaders of the OTs meet together to discuss policies of common interest to all of us. At the closing of the JMC, the delegates were graced with the presence of His Royal Highness Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, who spoke to the need to tackle climate change, and at the same time he met with a number of young persons, including from the OTs, including Tivon Howe from Montserrat. While Minister Milling was not in a position to make a commitment, I can assure you that Montserrat's position on matters of the current budget, impact of COVID-19 on the socio-economic landscape of the island, the need for a more robust capital fund stream which will help to grow the economy, renewable energy, and the environment were all discussed with her. Recognizing the needs of the OTs and that these needs run across multi-ministries in the United Kingdom, the Minister agreed to a regular ministerial meetings and a stand across Whitehall Programme Board to ensure that OTs are regularly consulted on all matters of issues and all relevant issues. And this was a matter of concern for all of us as OT leaders, because decisions were made in the UK on our behalf and we had no consultation whatsoever. And this was a matter that we raised and forcefully put forward. And the minister have agreed that we will have regular meetings with ministries across Whitehall, and that, as she said, she will be our champion in those meetings, and she'll be a champion for the overseas territories. We're very pleased to have Minister Milling with us. She was new, and as always, we have had new ministers, but we are very seldom able to build that relationship. I gather that if Minister Milling remains in that position for quite a while, she will definitely be a champion for the OTs. She has inspired us. She sounds genuine. She seems to be interested in the OTs. And as I said to her, I look forward to inviting her to Montserrat and to working with her so that she, when she comes to Montserrat, she can see for herself the situation that we are in and to see how best we can work together to advance the good of our peoples. Let me move on to Festival 2021. We have with us this afternoon the Director of Montserrat Arts Council, Mr. Kenneth Silcott. As I said before, Deputy Premier is also here, as Fiona said. In previous press briefing, I alerted you that we were going to have festival this year, and that once plans were in place, we would return with updates. We are going to have festival this year. But festival this year will be held against the backdrop of COVID-19. We are all conscious that COVID-19 is still a cause for concern in our region and in other countries where visitors and residents will be coming from. With a mere 42% of our population being vaccinated, there is absolutely no room for risk-taking. Therefore, all COVID-19 protocols must be observed throughout the season, and persons who are in quarantine must remain there until they are given the green light to leave. The quarantine unit and the police will have the responsibility to ensure that persons who are in quarantine remain there for the full duration of the quarantine period. There can be no laying down of our guards, and anyone who breaks the quarantine rules will be prosecuted, and this includes persons in a household with whom they are staying. I make it very clear. There will be no letting up, there will be no compromise. Persons in quarantine must remain in quarantine. And they are staying with persons who are also in quarantine. They too must remain in quarantine. We cannot take chances. And let me briefly remind us of the protocols that are in place, especially if you are listening for the first time, just to make sure that if you are traveling to Montserrat, that you are aware of what is required of you. If you are a vaccinated person coming to Montserrat, you must, of course, get your clearance from Immigration and Health, and you must come here with a valid negative PCR test. On arriving on island, you will go into a 5-day quarantine. 5 days of quarantine. On the 4th day, you will be tested, and if you are negative, you will be released on the 5th day. But of course, if you're positive, you have to remain in quarantine. The test for release on that day is $150 EC. So you need to have that extra cash to pay for that test, in addition to your return COVID test fees. If you're coming to Montserrat and you are unvaccinated, your quarantine period is 14 days. 14 days. On arrival, of course, you must come in with a PCR test, negative. On arrival, you will be tested again, and you go straight into quarantine for 14 days. On the 13th, you'll be tested, and if you are negative, you will be released. If you are positive, of course, you remain in quarantine until you get the green light. And so your total package, in terms of fees, 2 tests, 1 on arrival and 1 on exit, is $450 EC. $450 EC. The biggest concern that we have as a government is that if you're coming into Montserrat for 2 weeks, you must make sure that you come. If you want to spend 2 weeks vacation, you must come and spend at least 2 weeks before that, just to make sure. If you're coming for Christmas and you're vaccinated, if you're coming for Christmas and you are vaccinated, the latest you can arrive on the island is probably December 18th, 19th, thereabout. Just to make sure, and that's it in case, that's provided that you are negative right through. So if you come in on the 19th, then you have your 5-day quarantine and you can spend Christmas with your family and friends. If you're coming to Montserrat unvaccinated, if you want to spend Christmas with your families and friends, you must be here before at least the 11th or the 10th of December. If you're coming in after the 10th of December, clearly you're not going to be able to go out and spend and revel with your friends because you will be in quarantine irrespective. So I'm urging you, please plan your flights if you're coming to Montserrat from overseas to be here so that you can complete your quarantine periods and still have time to spend with your family. Mask wearing is still mandatory in Montserrat, and especially in these last days where we have this new variants, we are more strict. The gathering size is 75, still is with certain exceptions. Social distancing is still in place, 3 feet for financial institutions and 6 feet at other places. And you must make sure we know that there are hand sanitizers and such things at the entrances of business places. Listeners, media of the press, members of the press, as a government, we are determined to keep COVID out, or at least to minimize the risk of community spread. I now turn over to Mr. Silvert. I don't know what you want.
Go ahead. Yeah,
That's it. That's it. Good.
Make sure it's on. You have remarks? Go ahead. You have remarks? Or you just want questions?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for welcoming me here. I appreciate that. In preparation for Carnival 2021, we, Montserrat Arts Council, presented the Ministry of Health and Social Services with 2 options. Either to have the activities and the events in Festival Village or Cultural Center. Me personally actually prefers the outdoors as a Calypsonian and prefer actually to be in Festival Village. Excuse me. However, I'm learning that the government would not be sanctioning any activities in the Festival Village. Therefore, with that backdrop, these are the only option we have would be Cultural Center for King of Kings, Calypso Eliminations, Calypso Finals, and also the Queen Show. I'm anticipating and hoping that our Cultural Center would be able to host between 150 to 200 persons. Now, with that being considered, these are the controls that we'll put in place. All patrons will be required to book their seats in advance and also provide their full contact details. This will help us with contact tracing. They also will be required to wear face masks in order to enter the cultural center. We will conduct temperature checks at each event. We will ensure that all persons are assigned, and we'll also make sure that the toilets are sanitized on a regular basis. We will have a qualified nurse or health professional at each event. Patrons will be taken to their seats by ushers, 2 ushers per seating level, and ushers will be required to wear a mask. We will change the seating layout or available seating based on whether it's a family or individual. In each row, the seat will be allocated based on the type of booking, individuals or household. Members of same household can sit together. To ensure that all persons are kept 3 feet apart, we will skip the second row at Cultural Center and also skip a seat between each household or each individual. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Silcott. And thank you, Premier. With those remarks, we'll now open for questions from the press. And as we would normally do, we would start with, 2 questions each, just so that we have, a level of fairness across the media houses. And of course, if there is additional time, we will have another round of questions or questioning. Now, we're going to start first. Well, anyone can go first at this point. Narissa, so you have the mic. So Narissa, Discover Montserrat is here. Bennett Roach is online. DS Media is present, and also Keola Green from ZGB Radio. So Narissa, over to you.
Thank you, Premier. Indications are that ahead of the FAM meeting coming up, that they are considering just giving us the same settlement as currently, that we currently have. Tell me what is happening, what's conversation happening within the ministries about how you plan to manage this or negotiate for a different option. What's the plans for that?
Just repeat it again.
Basically, I understand that ahead of the FAM meetings are coming up, but your early indications, TOR that you have, has said that they're planning to just give you the budget that they currently gave us for this year. How you plan to deal with that now coming out of the UK when you don't yet have a confirmation on the other things you've requested?
Thank you very much, Narissa. The UK is still on, our spending review is still ongoing at Whitehall. And we're all aware that sometime last year, late last year, around this time last year, matter of fact, the UK government took a decision to reduce the ODA budget from 0.7% to 0.5%. And that 0.7% is in law. That 0.7% of GDP must be awarded to, for ODA services. But the government took the decision last November, thereabout, to reduce that by 0.5%, which means that the funding, because all ODA funding is managed by the FCDO. And that funding is not for Montserrat, not for the OTs. It is UK's global funding, which they use for all countries across the world. And if you note the expression coming out of from the Right Honourable Boris Johnson, the mere fact that they merged FCDO and DFID is that they are tying their foreign policy with aid. And so what it means for us is that if the ODA budget is cut, and that is where we get our own subvention from, then clearly there could be a cut in allocations for all of us. Could be. Because if the pool of fund is reduced, then clearly this distribution pool could be closed as well. We have had discussions when we were in London with the FCO team. And all indications are that our budget the budget we have now will not be reduced. That indication. At least we have that assurance. I can speak because I had a meeting with them in London. They'll be here in the next 2 weeks' time. And we are hoping to have as a matter of fact, we had other discussions with them on other matters. But they'll be here in 2 weeks' time, I think on the 13th, 14th, thereabout. And that a public announcement will be made then. But I can assure you that I've been given the guarantee that our current budget will not be reduced, if anything.
But considering that over the last year, considerable allocations were shifted to the health ministry, especially to be able to handle the COVID crisis, what's going to happen to your overall budget in other areas that were cut short to be able to keep us going?
We didn't cut other ministries, what we did is we did not cut the Ministry of Health and Education budget. They remain standard. Yes, we had to supplement those budgets because clearly the unknown, which was COVID, we had to put in place measures to protect the people of Montserrat. We had to purchase additional equipment. I don't think the demand, and I keep my fingers crossed, that the demand for those additional spending that pressure will be on the budget this year. I think we are managing COVID fairly well. We have gone over the hump, and that is why I'm so rigid, for want of a better word, in ensuring that we keep COVID where it is, so that at least it will not, an emergence of cases will not put additional pressure on the system, especially the health system. Because if we do that, then clearly we have to shift monies from other ministries. You would understand that, for instance, there's a pressure on the budget for social services, for instance. There's a pressure on the budget for like Medivacs and for additional assistance to households. There's pressure on the budget for additional medications because the cost of medication is going up. So all of these things, and you know that in our last, just a few days ago when we had our legislative assembly, that a supplementary appropriation was done, and all of the money went to the Ministry of Health because for different things. Medivac is a headache for us, but we have to do it because there's no way government can deny emergency medical assistance to anyone. So even if someone comes to you, and even if they have the means, but they're not ready to expose those means, you must provide those individuals with medical attention and then deal with that. And in some cases, when you do that, you just do not retrieve any of those funding. I can tell you for certain that the budget, the Medivac budget, is way out 5 months into budget, and we have to provide more funding for it. But what do we do? When somebody comes to us, do we say no, unless you die? Clearly not. So we have to find ways and means. So these are the areas that start to put pressure on the budget. And that is why we are asking, and I say we from Ministry of Finance and my office, we are asking departments and heads of department to manage those resources, because we may have to come back to you and take a little from you to tap up somebody else.
Okay. If your budget is flatlined, how are you going to cover the difference in your port budget? There's a significant shortfall there.
The port doesn't come from capital, but I'll let the Minister of answer that.
Because that question is always asked in general about the flatline budget, but the total government budget is not just the recurrent, there's a capital side to the government budget.
Yeah.
So even though the recurrent budget may be flatline, it does not mean that you do not have things in your capital side. For things like the port and extra projects that will be done will not show up in your recurrent budget. So if there's extra money allocated for the port, that will come as a separate capital funding, and it really has nothing to do with the recurrent budget.
But you don't have a confirmation yet that you're going to get that difference, do you?
It's on the minister's desk awaiting her decision.
Yes. That was one thing that we discussed, and we don't know what happened, but we let you know when we get a confirmation.
Good afternoon, Premier. Again, Dwight Sampson, DS Media, but subletting also for Ghana Express News. Like Mackenzie can't make it today. Premier, I just have one particular question. I think it's a question that most persons on Montserrat is asking now. What measures is your government taking to alleviate the financial hardship currently facing persons living here? The prices of food and services have skyrocketed. We can't even use the word increase anymore. Basic food items, medicines, and so on and so forth has skyrocketed. What measures is your government taking to alleviate the financial hardship?
Thank you very much, Dwight. It's a very important question. And we are very concerned. And personally, I'm very concerned about the impact that the high cost of food can have on especially the vulnerable, especially persons who have underlying issues. Because if they don't have monies to buy proper nutritious food, they are going to be suffering even more. The problem is that this increased cost is not a Montserrat issue. It's across the world. It is a supply chain issue. It is the pandemic has now subsided in some areas, and people are spending more. So there's pressure. More people are spending more. So the economies of the world are growing, and there's a demand for more products. And there's a shortage. So the whole demand and supply thing comes into play. There's a shortage of some product, so it pushes the price up. Clearly, government is conscious that it is happening. And as I said 2 days ago, I've asked the Ministry of Finance to give me the data. Yes, it's one thing to say things are moving, and we might go shop and see 1 or 2 items moving. But in order for you to make a case, or even to consider some kind of relief in whatever form, you must have the empirical data to say, okay, these were the prices for the basic food basket 2 months ago, and these are the price now. And so you say, yes, the price have increased by 1%, 2%, and then you determine as a government what measures can you take to offset that. You just cannot emotionally get up and say, cost of living is going up, let's do something. Because bear in mind, if we decide to take off duty off foodstuff, for instance, you know what that means? It means that you're depriving your budget of that monies. And so the question is, what are you willing to give up to offset it? We are looking at it seriously because we believe that we will have to do something if it continues, and there seems to be no end. There's no end in view as to when it will start, when the price would stabilize. So we are in fact looking at it, and the Ministry of Finance is working out the stats to give us the data. And once we receive those data, then we will make a decision as a government.
Supplementary. And we understand that we are somewhat 22 months into a pandemic. The food prices have been going up for this extended time. It has become noticeable because, as I said, we cannot use the word increase anymore. It's now skyrocketed. And so far, no changes have been made. I remember personally buying a cylinder of gas in June of this year, 100-pound cylinder. I paid $200 for it, the highest I've ever paid in my adult life. The prices have been going up, but there have been no word from the government as to what measures are going to be to take. So at least there is some silver lining, some glimmer of hope for persons who are facing it. It's one thing to have the data, it's one thing to be assured of the data, and we are confident of that. We are hopeful of that. But we would like to know from our government what decisions, what strategies, what methodology that is going to be taken to address these skyrocketing prices and to provide hope for families, the low-income families among our community.
Clearly, hope is what we want to give to people. But I still reiterate, it cannot be an emotional move. It has to be based on what the data we have in front of us. We will look at the data and we will take some actions. The point is, the position we're in as a colony, the position we're in in budgetary aid, you don't have a free hand to just say tomorrow morning, I want to take off or reduce the tariff on a product. You just don't have that latitude. You have to make a case. And the way the country is, you have to discuss that with your funding partners. So even if I want to do, abolish duty on foodstuff for a period of time, you have to do all the maths. If I give away 10% on foodstuff, what is the implication for the other side of the budget? And how do I retrieve that? Or what do we cut? What do we give up in order to make sure? So it's a chicken and egg situation. We have to balance it. We are working as seriously. I can assure you that we are working on it. We are conscious that the cost of living is going up. We are conscious, for instance, oil prices going up. Yesterday it came down yesterday. Crude came down yesterday, but it's going up. It's something we have no control over. If according to the predictions, that this price rise will continue until maybe halfway next year or beyond, then if you just jump and take some measures now, 2 months down the road, you have to come back again. And that is why I'm saying, let us get the data, let us analyze the data, and let us make a decision, which is not just a hip-shoddy one, but one that is going to last. We are conscious, and we are working on it. We're very much conscious of what's happening across behind us.
Granted. Thank you so much, Mr. Premier. My next question is to Mr. Silcott. The decision to have festival activities indoor rather than outdoor? Is that a decision based on science, or is that a decision based on control?
It's a decision based on the Ministry of Health.
So you can't say if that decision was based on science.
No, that's beyond my remit. I gave two options to the Ministry of Health, and they took the cultural center to safeguard themselves and from health aspects. So there's no control. It's better control as far as contact tracing and so forth than the village. So I do understand.
Okay. And in terms of preparation and preparatory work for the festival, and for persons who on island and off island who may be a bit concerned about actually going into the venue itself, will we still have the same facilities that we had in 2020, in 2021?
No, in 2020, it was more virtual.
That's what I'm actually.
Yes, in this case, I'm hoping that we could seat 150 to 200 people. So we will have tickets on sale shortly.
So it will be a virtual as well as an in-person?
Indeed, yes.
Okay.
Just to add to that the Mr. Secret is not a scientist, neither am I, but our decisions that we make is based on the advice we receive, and understanding that we have a very small population, understanding we have a very small health team, and you quite rightly pointed out, contact tracing is much easier when you have a controlled environment. If you have two or three cases, if you know they were in cultural center, you have a seat plan, you know who's sitting next to who, so you can go out and trace. If you go into an open space where you have 75, 100 persons together, you don't know the movement, because don't convince me that you can control a crowd spacing anywhere outside of cultural center. You have to do a lot to convince me that you can have a festival and you can control a crowd, give them social distancing, give them masks, make them wear a mask. It's absolutely difficult to do. And government, as it is for this year, is not supporting any outdoor activities just to make sure that we are safe. And especially within the last couple of days, we have this new variant, and it's spreading fast in a number of countries. Last night we had about 20 countries. The US have identified the first case yesterday. So we have to make sure we take these precautions. And people argue that, you can free up. Yes, free up. But the end result could be disastrous. And are we willing to take that risk? Certainly not.
A bunch of questions are coming to my mind, but I'll respect protocol. I make my other supplementary on that response you give. Yes.
Yes.
Well, let me just say this. So, since we're having all the activities indoor rather than outdoors, there would not be any street parades.
There'll be a motorcade.
Okay, just a motorcade, right. The 150 to 200 persons you refer to, does that include or exclude workers, media, photographers, etc.?
Include.
Wow, very tight. Okay, I'll leave it there for now.
Good afternoon around the table and to the listening audience. Keola Green from Radio Montserrat. Premier, it has been reported that there's been a 5% increase in the surcharge on electricity. Can you confirm this?
I would, you know what I'll do. You know what I'll do. I can't confirm it, but I think that if oil price is going up, clearly there's automatic increase in fuel surcharge, because the price of fuel tomorrow is going to go up, and they must pass that on. So I won't doubt it. I don't deal with bills. Somebody deals with bills in my house. But and clearly, it goes without saying that if oil price on the world market is going up, the fuel that more receive is going to go up, and then they have to pass that part. So it's possible.
Right. And has the government received a report from the Montserrat Utilities Limited as it relates to the frequent power outages? And if so, what are the plans in place to fix this?
There has been numerous reports submitted by MUL to say what the cause of the problems are. One of the problems they had is that some of the high-speed generators had gone down and are now currently under repair and still haven't been repaired. And then they also had an issue that the generators they weren't synchronizing, so they weren't talking to one another. So even though they had the generators, they couldn't run them similarly at the same time. They have been subsequently been able to fix the synchronization issue, but the high-speed generators still haven't been repaired, and they are indicating that they'll get those repaired by the end of the year. They have also submitted proposals they're looking at assistance in purchasing other generators to get the problem resolved. So those are with the Ministry of Finance, and they're currently looking at those proposals, looking at MUL financials to see how that best can be done. Remembering, as we pointed out, and we must keep remembering that Montserrat is in granting aid, you do not have $8 million lying down somewhere. So if somebody comes to you for a request of $8 million, it's not like you say, okay, yes, I understand, here is the money. You still have to obtain the money from your funding agents. And coming out of COP26, the UK government has said that they will not be funding fossil-based technologies going forward in any international community. So you also have that issue that they are not keen to be funding any fossil fuel things, and they're looking at our renewable plans. So we're currently drafting those proposals to resubmit back to them to see their response to that.
Right, and just to continue where you left off, so what commitment did they make as it relates to the development of the geothermal resources on Montserrat?
There was no commitment per se. They have been saying since about 6 years now that they have drilled the wells, they have proven the resource, and it's now up to the government of Montserrat to develop that part on their own. They have been saying that consistently for the past 6 years. It has been their position. So that's what we are currently looking at. How can you liaise with the private sector to get that facility up and running? So we are hoping and we are confident that we can get that done. And in my meetings with the energy minister, it was along that lines. That is the UK, that's the FCDO position. So we're looking at assistance from the energy unit now, because he's also industrial related strategy, to put in contact with the companies that are in the UK that does such, not geothermal, but does manufacturing, does industrial processes, that we have this resource. Are they interested in coming here? Can we start to have that conversation with those companies to come here to do manufacturing, to build up the resource? Because if we're just looking for somebody, because that was done already, if you're just looking for somebody to build the plant, to sell back power to the country, it's not going to come out cheaper. And early market engagement was done by the last administration. We have the report, and the numbers are coming up higher than your current cost. So it cannot work to the private sector, thing like that. So instead of wasting time with that, what I'm looking at now and discussions that we had is how can you get industries to use the power, and how can they use their contacts as the industrial strategy department to get these companies to come on. So that has been set up, and discussions have now started with that to see how we can proceed.
You spoke about companies in the UK, but is the government open to entertaining international investors outside of the UK?
Well, it's any companies, but since I was in the UK and you're talking to the UK minister, I was trying to get him in contact with, they'll be more likely, let's put it that way, to get their companies involved. But we are seeking all international companies, not just for the production of power for domestic use, but for industrial use. Because a lot of things have been said, but we must understand that the geothermal plants that we have now, the wells, as far as we know, from the reports, can produce 1.5 megawatts. Montserrat itself uses more than 1.5 megawatts. So the wells themselves cannot even produce enough power for our domestic supply. And a lot of conversation has been had, or you can use geothermal and you have the extra power for that. If you're honest, there is no extra power. The plants, the wells that we have can only produce for domestic residential consumption. So if you're looking to go beyond that in the industry, it would require extra investment in drilling new wells.
Mr. Roach, we have Mr. Roach on the line, the Montserrat reporter. Are you hearing us?
I am hearing you.
Okay, we're hearing you as
And I
well,
see
so you
that
could proceed with your questions.
I'm getting an echo back, so.
Oh,
I
you're
know
getting an
hearing me.
echo. We need to try and minimize that echo effect that you're
No,
hearing.
that's okay. It's not bothering me.
Is it better now?
Mr. Minister,
All
the
right.
last
Okay,
minister.
so you
who's
can
the-
proceed with your questions now, Mr. Roach.
Yes, the last minister just spoke about the requirement of Montserrat and the output of the wells and the geothermal thing. What is exactly the low and high period of requirement for Montserrat?
Volume was a little low on our end initially, so repeat that question, please.
what is the, to the minister who just mentioned about the output or the requirement of the he says it's 1.5 megawatts required for Montserrat, and the wells would be a problem and so on. But I'm asking, what is the low end of the need and what's the high end of the need?
Good day, sir. The low end is about 1.4, 1.5, and we peak close to 3, 2.7.
To 3.7, you said?
2.7.
2.7 to 2.7. Okay, that's just for information. Premier, good afternoon. You keep talking about the fact that the UK budget is going to be slashed for this and so on and so on and so on. And I really get confused why we're talking about that, because that's for them to say that when we make our request for what they want, we can't do so and so, so and so, so and so. I really would love to stop hearing that thing about they don't have any money, they have financial problems, they're slashing the ODA budget. That's really, we don't hear about that, Premier. What we want to hear from you is their response to our requests and our needs. Now, with that, I didn't hear a previous colleague ask the question about what measures are going to be put in place to really offset the hardships that people are having. But you restricted your response to what you're doing for food prices and the cost of food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we really want to know, Minister, is what are the plans you have in place? It will impact, for example, what we really do, get that port thing going so that people have work, et cetera, et cetera. Please, that's what we're interested in hearing.
Let me, first of all, correct you in saying that, and my colleague would bear me out. What I'm saying in terms of UK budget, I'm not defending the UK. Every time you speak to FCO, they preempt the conversation by saying we are making a sacrifice because the UK have to cut. This is what they say to me. The last time they said to me was last week, a day when we met. So this is not my saying. That is how they preempt the discussion by saying to us that is, and it's a fact. So that is fair. But for us, what I've said to the minister is that there's a lot of boast about the separate program. And it is good because it has provided us with replacement package of those assets that we have lost. What I said to her is what we really need is a package, is a more robust package, which would help us to grow the economy. A robust package that would help us to create employment, that will help people to be able to make life better. And so you speak about the port. Yes, the port is an asset that we want to get going, but that is not going to happen tomorrow morning. What I want us to do, and all of us, is that COVID is our biggest enemy right now. We cannot, there's certain restriction on movements. And so unless we be able to attract some foreign investment, unless we're able to attract some new monies, for instance, we are not going to move from where we are. So it is not just about government, it's about us together. And right now, where we are talking to the UK about starting up again a new private sector entity. And this is not new news. This is not news because it's being discussion. We have to now start from scratch again to develop an entity which will go out there and refocus and get Montserrat back out in terms of getting foreign direct investment, getting business into Montserrat again. We have to open up our borders so that we can start attracting people. We have to make life better. We have to make it easier for people to come to Montserrat and do business. It is absolutely difficult, extremely difficult for people to do business in Montserrat. And it's something that my colleague minister is talking about to myself. You come to Montserrat and you want to do business. You have to run around to about 5 or 6 or 7 places to get something done. These are the bottlenecks that we have to get rid of. If we have to move forward, we must get rid of these bottlenecks so we can at least put the country on a footing where we can start stimulating the economy. It's not going to happen unless we do these things. The port is not going to come tomorrow morning. We're not going to get geothermal tomorrow morning. but what else can we do? How can we do things? And that is why my government have provided this additional funding. First of all, we have provided some funding for the fiber optic connectivity. Now we are providing some funding to help small businesses to buy assets that they could not have bought because they didn't have any money, to help them to move forward. So there are little things that we are doing based on the limited resources we have. Because whatever we have to balance it. We have to spread it out. You have to go across the country, all the services. So we are doing what we have to do, but at the same time, we are working to make sure that we build the future economy. And it's not going to happen tomorrow morning. It's not going to happen on the granting aid, definitely not. We have to be able to make our own money. And all of us together have to do that. I hope I at least answered some part of the question.
You certainly didn't help in answer to the question I'm asking, Premier. One thing you said is that you spoke to the FDCO people on your recent trip, and you mentioned that what you need is a package. Do you have a package that you put to the minister for the minister to say, we can't support that, it's too much, it's too little, this is so on and so on? I know how they work, Premier, in there with them previous years. And so, but did we bring a package to them? Can you tell us that this is the package you took to them and they are bobbing and weaving? That's the question. That is what people on the ground wants to know. That is what we want to know. What is in that package? What is that package you put to them, Premier? I don't expect you to tell me that here now.
No, I could tell you where we're going.
No, you can tell us where you're going, but what is it? What is the package? What is it you're asking? What is it you're putting in place to do those things that you just talked about? I'm not agreeing with you with some, but whom I do not agree with some of what you're talking about. This is not going to come overnight, and that is not coming overnight, and so on and so on. I heard a talk earlier about one of the problems with the court is not being enough money, and so on and so on. But you know what is being done about that to really get this going, Premier? When you got into office, that port was something about the port was ready to go. Nothing has happened. We've had two more consultations with the people. Consultations that were done before you got into, and always ongoing when you got into to office. So you know what is all that? Where is all that getting us? What people want to see some action. Not just talk about the money is not enough and so on and so on. I happen also to know, Premier, that yes, the money was not enough, but that's not what really happened. And I will write the rest. I'm not going to continue to say anything here about that. But you know, what we need to think is something that will have some action. And I don't know how you're going to respond to that, so I'll leave it that you can think about it, Premier, and maybe, you know, send me something on it. Let me go on, therefore, to festival. Do we have a number of visitors that we anticipate that we are likely to get coming into Montserrat, wanting to come into Montserrat for the festival, over the festival period?
It is, thank you very much, Mr. Roach. It is very difficult to determine who is coming to Montserrat, especially when Montserratians does not have to request to come. What we will know is the applications that have been made. And remember, you can make application, 72 hours before you're ready to travel? So in terms of whether there's a number of persons who are coming to Montserrat, we won't have that information at this point in time. Because Montserrat will just pack up and decide that they're coming, and the prerogative is theirs to just pack up and come to Montserrat because Montserrat is their home. So we can't tell you that I have 100, 150 persons coming. And most times it's after they reach here, you are really able to assess the numbers. It's extremely difficult to tell you offhand that 500 people coming for Christmas. What I do know is that the Office of the Premier did a survey recently in terms of the airlines. And what we know, what we have seen, is that a number of persons, as a matter of fact, the majority of persons are saying that they're coming for March, whatever it is. And that is the result of the survey. So we're expecting to have more persons traveling around March next year, which is St. Patrick's, all things being equal, rather than for December. But truly, Montserrat usually come home for Christmas, but we have no control over how many people come in. And that is why I'm so concerned that they're coming unknown to us. The numbers could be significant, and it put pressure, additional pressure on the health system.
Okay. No, so Premier, now, as regards to the indoor and outdoor, somebody asked about the science and so on, whether it was made on the science, and I'm pretty sure this was what they had in the back of their mind. It's been said throughout the entire world that any transmission of the COVID thing is far less outside rather than indoors, Premier, especially in a setting like the cultural center that doesn't have a very good airflow. And so that I'm sure that the festival village can hold a lot more than the 175 people. But if we limit it, still limit it, it is the problem, Premier, from all the science and for everything that they talk about everywhere, all over the world, is that outdoors is much safer than having anything indoors. So I don't understand why that decision was made the way it was made. And as far as I know, I mean, I can recall, Premier, from the hundreds, maybe thousands of people that we've had at festival, you don't see that movement. When it's at the festival, activity is continuous. And I don't recall seeing that any movement among people. People, some are seated, some are standing. The only thing that people go to do is to go to the bars and the food places to get food and so on and so on. So I really don't understand why it was so difficult or how easy that was to make that decision to have it inside the control center.
I hear the plea. And let me be honest with you.
I'm putting some facts before you. It's not a plea I'm telling you, because certainly I'm sure you can't dispute what I just said there. It's not a plea. It's just some facts I'm putting before you, which I can't believe that you've considered all of that, because then you wouldn't have made that decision.
Other countries across the region actually cancel their festival this year. Others, actually. We have decided that to bring some relaxation to people, we are going to have some semblance of festival. There's no way you're going to have festival on Montserrat like 2019. And I challenge any one of you to give me a roadmap as to how you're going to manage 150 persons in Festival Village. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying I need to see that roadmap and how you're going to control the movements. And if you can do that, then fine. But government makes decision based on advice and, of course, the science. Because the closer people get together, of course, in the cultural center, there is some level of control because you wear your mask. You're being you have a distancing, a set distance. You have your sanitization taking place. So there's some level of disease control mechanism at the cultural center. You can have your sanitizers at the entrance of Festival Village. But when I walk in, are you going to take some glue and glue me down to a spot? Is that what we are saying? No. And so I'm saying to you, it's easier to manage the cultural center. Yes, maybe the risk is higher in terms of disease spread. But I think it's easier to manage the cultural center than to manage an open area.
You want to avoid, that's the only problem that you are concerned about.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. We'll go for additional questions from the press as we do have some extra time here.
Premier, just to kind of go back to your conversation around a new private sector entity. As it relates to investment, people usually are looking for something to invest in. Why do we want to create an investment agency when at this point we don't have any significant or attractive investment opportunities that are created that we can start to leverage? Also, adding to that, can you give us an update on the EDS? How many people have already applied and maybe have been approved already? And how are we going to fix this disconnect between the types of entities that would love to get financial support, business support, and the fact that you have a gap in terms of the requests, the specifications for who can apply for that fund?
Thank you very much, Nerissa. To be honest, I have not had an update on the EDSS yet. I wasn't able to get an update on that. I hope to do that sometime early next week and get an update as to where we are on it. In terms of the entity, we're talking about hotel, we're talking about building a hotel, we're talking about condominiums, we're talking about areas that could create employment for people. These are areas that we have to get some kind of investment to come inside here and invest in things. We're talking about people who want to build villas, because you have to grow those numbers. So there are possibilities for investment in Montserrat, but who is going to lead on it? Certainly, and no disrespect to the public service. I am a former public servant, I understand. I am not trained to operate to run private sector business. You must have an entity and the people with the knowledge and the skill sets to manage it. And that is why the MDC was so important. What it did is that it was a one-stop shop. You come into Montserrat, you want to do business, you go one split and you stop and you talk to people and get things done. And so we cannot underestimate the importance of that institution. It's no longer there. So what we have to do now in order to get somebody to run that, because my trade division is not in a position to deal with an investor who comes to Montserrat. No, not. So then clearly you have to have an entity staffed with people who understand private sector business. And you know fully how private sector operate. You have to have somebody who understands private sector. You have to think like the private sector, behave like the private sector, and get them to that thing. So there is a need, and there are opportunities in Montserrat. I have a meeting next week with some people. There's opportunities in Montserrat, people who want to come to Montserrat to invest. But I can't run it, neither my ministers, and which ministry, which agency in government is going to run it. So we have to, it's unfortunate that they have to start from scratch again. Very unfortunate, but that's where we are right now.
Premier, afternoon again. I want to ask you a very specific question. I think it's a long line of the question I would have asked in the first round of questions. And I want to remind you, if I may, that on the night of your election victory, you said that you are Premier, not only for Montserratians, but also for persons who, from our CARICOM brothers and sisters who choose to make Montserrat their home. Now, according to the laws of Montserrat and the stipulations, non-nationals who don't have any Montserrat title or passport or whatever, whichever, are not entitled to social services benefit. But all of us are Montserratians. All of us living on Montserrat, rather, are encountering the same hardship and are facing the same struggles. What measure, if any, is your government putting in place to assist our CARICOM brothers and sisters who have made Montserrat their home and are contributing to the development of Montserrat?
Thank you very much, Dwight. We have not as yet looked at the legislation, but it has come that discussion has surfaced several times. It's something that FCDO has spoken to when it comes to inclusivity, that everybody should be treated fairly. The problem you have, it's that any addition is additional cost. And what we are saying to the UK, we have no objection in including everybody into a social program, but provide us with the additional resources, and they're just not doing it. And you know, they're saying to you, yes, include everybody, and we're willing to do that. But can we afford it from what we have? If the UK is going to give us the additional funding, clearly. But we are willing, and to be honest, some, not all, some, I don't want to call it non-nationals, some CARICOM brothers and sisters do benefit, in some cases, from the social welfare systems. Yes, you can go in and sign up for a continuous welfare package. That's what you're saying. But you do get, in terms of difficulties, if you have a difficulty, they will provide, I know they have provided things like uniforms, you know, don't want to elaborate on, don't want to go down and detail it, but they have in fact been provided. But I think what you're getting at is how can you as a CARICOM brother and sister who is not working and doesn't have the means to survive can get on the social welfare system. I guess that's where you're coming from, and it's not. I hope that's where you're coming from.
Not necessarily.
Sorry to preempt.
I'm all I'm saying is what sort of support, if any. I mean, I don't understand the entire logic. So if I'm sitting here acting as if I do, I apologize. What I'm saying that we all collectively, as residents of Montserrat, both Monstrattians and Caricom brothers and sisters, are facing the same struggles, the same difficulties with skyrocketing prices and so on. So I'm asking if your government are putting any measures in place for those persons who may need prolonged assistance, and not the one-off. I know that they offer some one-off assistance, which is good. It helps the situation. But for those that may just need assistance to get them back on their feet, and there are other persons who may were a part of the hospitality industry, which of course has suffered immensely because our borders were closed until October, who are out of work, not at any fault of theirs, but still have children to feed and other utilities and so on to pay. You know, what sort of avenues or benefits is provided for those persons to help them to get back on their feet?
There are no cash benefits directly to that. But if the point you raised earlier about the cost of living, and you were pushing us to asking us what we are doing to cushion out those effects. And anything we do to cushion the impact of the cost of living in terms of food items and petrol and other things, it has to be across the board. It cannot be for a specific group of persons. So any benefits to be derived in terms of a process to reduce the cost of living in Montserrat must be across the board. You just cannot do it for a specific group. The only area I know that there's this legal inequity, if you want to put it that way, it's in the social welfare system, where if you're not a Montserratian, you don't qualify for social welfare on a continuous basis, but you do get assistance. But I hope we can look at the legislation and talk with the UK, and we have to get additional, because as I said to you in my earlier question answer, is that line of the budget is seriously under pressure, that social welfare line, seriously. Since COVID, more and more persons have come onto the system, and it's becoming unbearable. But you can't deny people if they need, and that is why they paid for the one-off at times.
Premier, before I ask my question, Mr. Silcott, although that the activities will be at the culture center, will the bars in Festival Village be open?
Yes, they will. And basically, we'll have minor events there. I'm even thinking along the lines, while we're having events in the cultural center, there might be a large screen television showing the same event in the Festival Village. So the vendors can at least make $12.
Right. So if we're going to be having that sort of arrangement, why not just have it in the Festival Village? But that's not the question. Premier, what plans are there to ensure that the COVID protocols would actually be enforced? The set numbers at the bars, that sort of stuff. Do we expect to see the cadets, the defense force, the police out on the road ensuring that, we're following those protocols?
Thank you very much. You're preempting me, because I was supposed to make a request this morning in cabinet, and it missed me, to be honest, on any business. I am of the view that I need to increase some presence on the road, clearly. And the only way we can do that is to enlist the Montserrat Defense Force. I'm saying it now, I was supposed to raise this morning in cabinet. I'm seriously thinking that I have to enlist the Defense Force to help us, to get the police to do the work, clearly. It just missed me. Thank you for reminding me, because I had it in my mind this morning, to be honest.
Okay, and Mr. Roach, your last question, if you have any additional questions at this point in time, Mr. Roach? Is Mr. Roach still with us?
He's still there.
I forgot to unmute my mic. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I said I would really just like to hear from the Premier, and as I said, I don't expect to hear that now. What that package is, what is it that we're asking? What is it that's on the table to really get us up and moving, even in our situation, in the conditions that we face? And I just heard him talk about, putting more people on the road, more military and police presence on the road. When I drive through the north, I hardly see people out there on the road. So was he referring to what festival time, or in with specific reference to
Mr.
Keola's
Roach.
question?
He was responding directly to Keola's question regarding increased presence on the roads during the festival season.
On the roads?
Just to ensure that the regulations are being followed, the COVID-19 regulations. So that was the question posed by Keola Green, and that the response regarding
But what are those protocols on the road that need to be that are in place? I don't know what those are.
I think when Keola asked the question, she was just referencing the road.
Okay, so fine. I'm asking you now, what are those protocols that are on the road that would require that? That's what. Then therefore, let me ask that, because I don't understand that.
She was referring to the COVID-19 protocols.
No, listen, please. I'm asking, what are the protocols?
Okay, Mr. Roach. We have social distancing.
I can see us talking about that, and that is key. And at the banks, on the roads.
We had, I think, in the last order, we reduced the distance in the banks from 6 feet to 3 feet because we recognized that there was some congestion on the premises, and so cabinet took a decision to ease the pressure on the institution like bank and credit union and Western Union and other places. To reduce the space to 3 feet so that at least the congestion will be eased. That is one. To ensure that you wear a mask, of course. Mask wearing is mandatory, and it is the onus on the police and whoever else to ensure that people are not entering establishments not having on their mask. That is critical for us, because the bottom line here, Mr. Roach, is the safety of our people, the protection of our people. And if you have 100 people in an area without mask, and 10 of them might be who knows, might be infected with COVID. We don't know. And for any reason you have them clutching together without mask and no distancing, that could spell disaster. So it's one thing to make merry, but after that, what happens? And I know a couple of my Caribbean countries who had big celebration at some time, and the next week, the numbers start rising. We just cannot afford it. So those are the protocols in place: your distancing, your hand sanitizing, your mask wearing, your distancing, and that sort of thing. These are the kind of protocols that must be adhered to during this festive season. It's not business as usual. It cannot be business as usual. Some people might think so because, let me just say this, One of the problems we have in this country is that we have never really felt the brunt of COVID. Have never. We have never lost a loved one from COVID. We have never lost a co-worker from COVID. We have never seen somebody suffering on a ventilator for weeks. And so I think we take it for granted in this country because that COVID is a myth. And that is why the population, the vaccinated population is 42%. Because we have never really been under pressure from COVID. When you see some countries where persons are dying daily, nurses and healthcare workers are dying, your colleague in the hospital and they're on ventilators. This is the reality of the situation. Do we want that to happen to us? We can't. Our numbers. So we have to take measures. And I know people will say, let's have festival in the open, let's have jump up, let's have everything. That is fine. But I will not be part of that decision making.
Yes, Mr. Roach, we're waiting for. Was that your final question, or you were clarifying KOS?
Yes, I still think there are lots of the Premier speaks a lot about this and that, but not really answering the question, because I was all going back over the protocols with the mask wearing and so on and so on. I would expect a different approach than telling people we're going to fine you $10,000 or $1,000. Is to really encourage people to be responsible. That's really what we need in this place, is to just encourage people to be responsible. And there are these things in place. Yes, everybody who's going into the cultural center, even in the circumstance or into the festival, should wear a mask. Once you are having any gathering at all, you should wear a mask. But they were talking about on the roads, and that's what I was asking about, really. What was this question? Was that a misspeak then about talking about on the roads? Because I take on the roads to mean when I'm going down Braid Center from Braid down to Carsby or into Little Bay. That's what I take is on the road. Was that intended just for the gathering and for the festivities and so on, or on the roads normally? That was my question really. That was my concern.
Yeah, Mr. Roach, thank you. We know it's not, we didn't mean the road. It's just you know what I mean?
Colloquial phrase.
Yeah, phrase. We didn't mean the road, coming down Bridge Road or going up St. John's. We just didn't mean that. So forgive us if we misled you in believing that we meant the road.
Okay, was that your last question? I think
Yes,
you
I'll
clarified that
leave
point
it
now.
right there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roach. And Premier, final comments from you as we wrap up today's press conference, please.
Thank you very much, Vivian. Thank you very much, members of the media. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. This is probably our last press conference for the year, most likely. Certainly, it's a pleasure working with you all. I look forward to us working together, God's willing. Yes, I want you to help me, to help us as a government. Let's face it, and forgive me if I'm pushing vaccination. But as leader of government business, as the leader of the country, I have no other choice. I have no option but to encourage you to please get vaccinated. It's for your good, for the good of your children, your family members, and your friends and others. Please, I think the minister would have announced a few days ago that or I think I heard it someplace that the ultra low temperature freezers are on island and are tested. That is the one to store the Pfizer vaccine. That is on island now. I think we got 2, if I'm not mistaken. I'm told that we can get Pfizer vaccine anytime now, once the machines once the refrigerators are certified and working. And we are encouraging you to please call the hospital, St. John's Health Center, and register for if it's your first shot, your second shot, or your booster. Please call and register. I've already registered for my booster, and as soon as Pfizer comes in, I'm going to go and get my shot. So I'm leading by example. I took my first shot on the 8th of February, and I'm still here.
March.
Sorry, February.
February.
Yes, February. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I took my first shot on the 8th of February, and I'm still here. So I can, nothing is certain in life, not even life. So, so I'm just urging you and encouraging you, help us, because, and forgive me, I get a little bit emotional when I speak about opening the borders. We can't keep this country locked down indefinitely. Mr. Sampson just spoke about the people in the tourism sector. And for almost 2 years, that sector is under pressure. We have to open this border at some point. Yes, I was asked whether I want to open, but should I keep the border closed to protect 60% as against the 40%? It's not a matter of protection, it's a matter of working together for the good of all of us. And so I want to thank you again, listeners, thank you, Media Press, for being here, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you to our listeners and viewers, and thank you to members of the press. Do have a wonderful afternoon.